The Ottoman grip and the spark of revolution before 1821 darkness. For nearly 400 years, Greece lived under the shadow of the Ottoman Empire. Once the land of philosophers, warriors, and poets, it had become a province in a vast foreign empire. The Parthenon stood, weathered but silent, no longer the proud symbol of a free people, but a relic surrounded by Ottoman cannons. Daily life for ordinary Greeks was shaped not by ancient glory, but by survival under foreign rule. But beneath the silence, something was stirring. The Ottoman Empire had conquered Greece in the mid-15th century, after the fall of Constantinople. To the Greeks, this was not just conquest, it was the end of a world. Under Ottoman rule, many Greeks paid heavy taxes, their Orthodox Church monitored, their language and traditions suppressed in subtle but constant ways. Some families gave up sons to the Ottoman system of devshirme, the practice of seizing Christian boys, converting them, and training them as soldiers of the empire, the feared janissaries. For centuries, this humiliation was remembered in whispers, in songs, in the hidden stories told at night. Yet, Greece was not erased. The Orthodox Church became a guardian of identity, keeping alive the faith, language, and traditions of the people. Villages far from the Ottoman cities preserved old customs, folk songs, and the dream of freedom. Even under oppression, memory lived on, and memory would fuel rebellion. Seeds of revolution by the late 18th century, the world around Greece was changing. The age of revolution had begun. The American Revolution, 1776, showed that empires could be defied. The French Revolution, 1789, declared that liberty belonged to all people. These ideas traveled across Europe, reaching Greek merchants and scholars who lived abroad. They whispered of rights, equality, and independence, words that ignited the imagination of a people long denied them. Greek merchants had grown wealthy in trade, especially in cities like Odessa, Vienna, and Constantinople. With money came education, and with education came nationalism. Many began to dream of a reborn Greece, not as a forgotten province, but as a nation standing proudly among others. In 1814, 3 Greek merchants in Odessa founded a secret society, the Filiki Eteria Friendly Society. Their goal? To plan and prepare a nationwide uprising against the Ottoman Empire. Members swore oaths of secrecy and spread their network across Europe and the Balkans. Their motto carried a warning: freedom or death. But could an unarmed, divided people really face the might of the Ottoman Empire? Daily life under Ottoman rule for the peasants of Greece, life was hard. Most were farmers working land that belonged to Ottoman landlords. Taxes were relentless. Grain, livestock, and money were taken to feed the empire. Many families lived in poverty, while Ottoman officials and local elites grew rich. And yet, resistance lived in the mountains. Outlaws known as clefts, bandits to some, heroes to others, fought the Ottomans with guerrilla tactics. They raided Ottoman garrisons, protected villages, and kept alive the fighting spirit. They were romanticized in Greek folk songs as symbols of defiance, the free men of the mountains who bowed to no one. Against them stood the armatoloi, local militias sometimes employed by the Ottomans to keep order. But in truth, the line between cleft and armatolos blurred. Many switched sides, depending on who offered survival or glory. In time, these men of the mountains would become the backbone of the revolution. The spark ignites by the early 19th century. Europe itself was unstable. The Ottoman Empire, once mighty, was weakening. Corruption spread, revolts simmered in the Balkans, and the empire was called the sick man of Europe. Meanwhile, Greeks abroad raised funds, recruited allies, and spread revolutionary ideas. In 1820, the Filiki Eteria found its leader, Alexander Ypsilantis, a Greek officer in the Russian army. Charismatic, bold, and deeply patriotic, he declared that the time for waiting was over. Greece would rise. The plan was daring. In 1821, uprisings would erupt across Greece, supported by sympathetic powers abroad. Hypsilantes himself would lead an invasion into the Balkans, sparking revolt across Ottoman territories. The dream was vast, a chain reaction that would shatter Ottoman control. But revolutions are rarely so simple. Suspense builds in February 1821. Hypsilantes crossed into the Ottoman-controlled Danubian principalities, raising the banner of revolution. He called upon Greeks and other Balkan Christians to join him, declaring, "Fight for faith and fatherland. Let us show the world that Greece is not dead." Excitement spread like wildfire. In villages, priests blessed rebel flags. Farmers took up arms. Old clef songs became battle cries. The dream of freedom, whispered for centuries, was finally spoken aloud. But the Ottomans were watching. Their response would be swift, brutal, and merciless. And soon, Greece would pay a terrible price for daring to rise. The flames of war, heroes, battles, and massacres. 1821 to 1826. The year was 1821, and Greece erupted in fire. From the rugged mountains of the Peloponnese to the islands of the Aegean, the cry of freedom or death rang out. Villagers armed with rusty muskets, farmers with sickles, and cleft warriors with stolen Ottoman rifles rose together. After centuries of silence, the Greeks were no longer subjects, they were rebels. But revolutions are not born in triumph. They are baptized in blood. The first uprisings, the Peloponnese, a mountainous region long known for resistance, became the beating heart of the revolt. In March 1821, Bishop Germanos of Patras is said to have raised the banner of revolution at the monastery of Agia Lavra. Whether legend or truth, the story captured the spirit of the uprising. Within weeks, Greek fighters seized control of several towns. Ottoman garrisons caught off guard were overwhelmed. On September 23, 1821, the rebels captured Tripolitsa, the Ottoman stronghold in the Peloponnese. What followed was both victory and horror. Greek fighters, furious after centuries of oppression, unleashed a massacre on the Muslim and Jewish population of the city. Thousands were killed. The Ottomans would not forget this. Meanwhile, uprisings spread across central Greece and the islands. In Moldavia and Wallachia, Hypsilantes' revolt faltered, crushed by Ottoman and Russian disapproval. But in Greece itself, the rebellion was gaining momentum. Still, the Greeks were far from united. Local leaders, warlords, and factions often clashed. Rivalries and ambition threatened the very cause they were fighting for. Yet, amidst the chaos, heroes began to emerge. The rise of heroes, one name echoed above the rest: Theodoros Kolokotronis. A veteran of cleft warfare, he knew the mountains, the people, and the art of guerrilla battle. With charisma and cunning, Kolokotronis became the soul of the revolution in the Peloponnese. His leadership turned ragged militias into an army that could stand against Ottoman might. Others rose too. Georgios Karaiskakis, a fierce fighter with a reputation for boldness, led men in central Greece. Andreas Myolis, a naval commander, rallied Greek ships against the Ottoman fleet. Laskarina Bouboulina, a wealthy widow turned naval leader, armed her own ships and fought with unmatched courage, becoming a legendary female commander in a world of men. Each figure became a symbol, showing that freedom demanded not just courage, but sacrifice. Ottoman fury, the Ottoman response was swift and devastating. In 1822, Sultan Mahmud II called for retribution. The empire struck with brutal force, determined to crush the rebellion before it spread. The most infamous act came at Chios. The island had been hesitant to join the revolution, fearing Ottoman wrath. But when a small revolt broke out, Ottoman troops landed to make an example. What followed was one of the darkest chapters of the war. In April 1822, the Ottomans massacred tens of thousands of civilians on Chios. Villages were burned, men slaughtered, and women and children sold into slavery. The horror shocked Europe. Painters like Eugene Delacroix immortalized the tragedy, turning it into a rallying cry for Philhellenes, foreign supporters of the Greek cause. But if the Ottomans thought terror would silence Greece, they were wrong. Every massacre only deepened the rebels' resolve. Struggles at sea to sea became another battlefield. The Ottomans commanded a massive fleet, but the Greeks had daring and ingenuity. Using small, fast ships, Greek sailors turned to fire ships. Vessels packed with explosives and set ablaze sailed directly into Ottoman warships. These suicidal missions destroyed powerful enemy ships and struck fear into the Ottoman navy. In 1822, Greek sailors used a fire ship to destroy the flagship of the Ottoman Admiral Karaisakis near Chios, killing thousands aboard. The balance at sea began to shift. Naval commanders like Philhellenes and Bouboulina kept the revolution alive, ensuring that supplies, fighters, and hope could move between the islands and mainland. Civil war within the revolution, yet, as the external war raged, Greece faced another danger from within. By 1823, rival factions of Greek leaders began fighting each other. Ambition, jealousy, and disputes over power divided the revolutionaries. Two civil wars erupted between 1823 and 1825, weakening the cause just as the Ottomans prepared a new offensive. And this time, the empire would call upon an even deadlier force, the Egyptians. The Egyptian intervention in 1825, the Ottomans turned to Muhammad Ali of Egypt, one of their most powerful vassals. His son, Ibrahim Pasha, led a modern, well-trained army into Greece. Unlike the Ottoman forces, Ibrahim's troops were disciplined, drilled in European style, and equipped with the latest weapons. When Ibrahim landed in the Peloponnese, disaster followed. Villages burned, crops were destroyed, civilians were slaughtered or enslaved. The Greek Revolution, already weakened by infighting, now faced annihilation. Kolokotronis and his fighters fought desperately, but the odds were grim. It seemed as if the dream of freedom was slipping away, drowned in fire and blood. But what happened next would change everything. For the fate of Greece was no longer in Greek hands alone. The great powers of Europe were about to intervene. The tide turns. Intervention of Europe, 1827 to 1829. By 1826, the Greek Revolution stood at the edge of ruin. Villages were burning, rebels were starving, and Ibrahim Pasha's Egyptian army swept through the Peloponnese with terrifying efficiency. For many Greeks, it seemed their uprising would end like so many before, drowned in blood, forgotten by history. But history, this time, would take a different turn, because across Europe, poets, politicians, and ordinary citizens were watching, and they could not look away. The voice of Europe, the massacre of Chios in 1822, and the desperate struggle of the Greeks had shocked the world. Across Europe, and even in America, sympathy for Greece exploded into what became known as Philhellenism, the love of Greece. To many, Greece was not just another oppressed people. It was the birthplace of democracy, philosophy, and Western civilization. The idea that the descendants of Socrates and Leonidas were enslaved under Ottoman rule felt unbearable to romantic thinkers of the 19th century. Famous figures spoke out. The English poet Lord Byron not only raised money for the cause, but traveled to Greece himself, ready to fight. In 1824, he died in the town of Missolonghi, not in battle, but from fever. His death turned him into a martyr, inspiring thousands more across Europe to support the revolution. Volunteers from France, Germany, Britain, and Italy flocked to Greece, some to fight, others to provide aid. Newspapers spread stories of Greek heroism, fueling public pressure on governments. The Greek struggle had become more than a local rebellion. It was a European cause. But sympathy alone would not defeat Ibrahim's army. The siege of Missolonghi, one event above all, forced Europe's hand. The third siege of Missolonghi. This small town had already endured 2 Ottoman sieges. In 1825, Ibrahim Pasha surrounded it again, determined to starve it into submission. For nearly a year, the people of Missolonghi resisted. Men, women, and children ate rats, grass, even leather to survive. By April 1826, there was no hope left. The defenders decided on a desperate plan, a mass breakout through Ottoman lines. At night, thousands tried to escape, but the Ottomans discovered the plan. What followed was slaughter. Thousands were killed. Those captured were enslaved. The fall of Missolonghi shocked Europe like never before. Newspapers compared it to ancient Sparta's last stand. The image of an entire town choosing death over surrender became a symbol of Greek courage. The great powers, Britain, France, and Russia, could no longer remain silent. The great powers step in by the late 1820s. European politics aligned in Greece's favor. Each great power had its own motives. Britain feared instability in the Mediterranean. Russia wanted influence over Orthodox Christians in the Balkans. France sought prestige and balance of power. Though rivals, they agreed on one thing: the bloodshed had to end. In 1827, they signed the Treaty of London, demanding an armistice between Greece and the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans ignored it. The powers responded with force. The Battle of Navarino, 1827, October 20th, 1827. The calm waters of Navarino Bay in the Peloponnese were about to witness history. A combined fleet of Britain, France, and Russia sailed into the bay, where the Ottoman Egyptian Navy, more than 80 ships, was anchored. The European commanders had orders only to enforce peace, but when shots rang out, a full-scale battle erupted. For hours, cannons thundered. Explosions lit the sky. Fire ships and broadsides turned the bay into chaos. When the smoke cleared, the Ottoman Egyptian fleet was shattered. Dozens of ships sunk, thousands dead. The European losses? Minimal. Navarino was more than a victory. It was a turning point. The Ottoman Empire had lost its naval power in the region. For the first time, Greece's survival seemed possible. Russian advanced the struggle did not end at sea. In 1828, Russia declared war on the Ottoman Empire, marching its armies deep into the Balkans. By 1829, Russian troops threatened Constantinople itself. The Ottomans, pressured on all sides, were forced to negotiate. The war that had begun as a desperate peasant revolt had now become an international crisis. And the outcome was clear. Greece could not be crushed without angering the great powers. The turning of the tide by 1829, Ibrahim Pasha's forces withdrew, pressured by European armies and navies. Greek rebels, though exhausted, regained control of much of their land. Hope returned to villages once blackened by fire. For the first time in centuries, the idea of a free Greek nation was no longer just a dream. It was becoming a reality. But victory would not come without struggle. Negotiations, politics, and the hard work of building a new state awaited. And in those final years, Greece would finally see the reward of its blood-soaked revolution. A new nation is born. The struggle for independence, 1830 to 1832, the dream had survived. After nearly a decade of bloodshed, massacres, and foreign intervention, Greece stood at the edge of freedom. But dreams are fragile, and turning rebellion into a nation would prove just as difficult as defeating the Ottomans. The London Protocol of 1830 and 1830, after years of diplomacy, the London Protocol was signed by Britain, France, and Russia. For the first time, Greece was recognized as an independent state. The boundaries were limited. Only parts of central Greece and the Peloponnese were included, but it was a start. For people who had lived under Ottoman rule for nearly 4 centuries, the mere word independence was a triumph. But recognition on paper was not the same as stability on the ground. The land was ravaged. Fields lay in ashes, towns in ruins. Families were scattered, thousands sold into slavery, and the economy shattered. Greece had won independence, but at a terrible price. And then came the question, who would rule the new nation? Ioannis Kapodistrias, a leader for a broken land in 1828, the great powers appointed Ioannis Kapodistrias as the first governor of Greece. A former Russian foreign minister, Kapodistrias was intelligent, diplomatic, and deeply committed to rebuilding his homeland. He introduced schools, reformed the army, and tried to rebuild agriculture. He created institutions where none had existed before, planting the seeds of a modern state. For the first time in centuries, Greeks saw the possibility of not just survival, but progress. Yet Capodistria also faced bitter opposition. Warlords and local leaders, who had fought for years, resented losing power to a central authority. Old rivalries reignited. The fragile unity of the revolution once again cracked under the weight of politics. In 1831, Capodistria was assassinated in Nafplio. His death shocked Europe and nearly plunged Greece back into chaos. But the dream of independence did not die with him. The birth of a kingdom, the great powers, determined to keep Greece stable, decided that the new state would not be a fragile republic, but a monarchy ruled by a European prince. After much debate, they chose Prince Otto of Bavaria, a 17-year-old German prince. In 1832, Otto arrived in Greece as its first king. For many Greeks, it was a strange sight, an outsider, young and foreign, crowned as ruler. Yet his arrival symbolized something greater: the recognition of Greece as a sovereign nation, protected by the strongest powers of Europe. The long war was over. Greece was free. Legacy of the revolution, the Greek War of Independence, was more than a national victory. It became a symbol for oppressed peoples everywhere. For Europe's romantics, it was proof that ancient ideals of freedom still burned. For the Ottoman Empire, it marked the beginning of decline in its European territories. And for the Greeks themselves, it was a rebirth, a return from centuries of silence. The cost had been enormous. Entire communities destroyed, tens of thousands killed, and a land left in ruins. But from the ashes, a nation had risen. As one revolutionary wrote, "Better 1 hour of freedom than 40 years of slavery." Closing reflection from the mountains where Clefs once fought as bandits, to the islands where fire ships lit up the sea, to the blood-soaked fields of Missolonghi, the Greek War of Independence was a story of endurance against impossible odds. It was a struggle fought not only with muskets and swords, but with faith, memory, and the unbreakable idea that freedom was worth everything. And though the revolution ended in 1832, its echoes still live on. Every time the Greek flag is raised, every time the people sing their anthem, they remember the vow sworn 2 centuries ago: freedom or death. And that was the story of the Greek War of Independence, a tale of courage, sacrifice, and the rebirth of a nation. If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more epic documentaries, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Which moment in this struggle for freedom inspired you the most? We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, thank you for watching. And remember, history is never just the past, it's the story of who we are.